Hello, Whit. How are you?
Hello, Sai. Great to
It's
see you.
likewise, my friend. I want to welcome everyone to the Inventing Leadership for the Future series. And I have the great privilege to be with my dear friend, Whit. And we are having this series of 3 conversations based on the MIT Sloan study that came out a little bit ago around leadership's digital transformation. So it should be very, very, very interesting conversations between us.
Which means that if you haven't read it, you really should,
There
right?
you go.
It's a really good. It's very stimulating.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And especially the way that to set the backdrop, really the way that it's organized in terms of a context collapse and the boundaries that are blurred between
Mhm.
home and work, which we'll focus on today. Next time we'll look at individuals and institutions and stakeholders and shareholders, and then ultimately get into the recommendations. So definitively a very, very great contribution from MIT Sloan all around.
Very much so. Very much so.
Excellent.
Good.
I would love for you, Whit, to introduce yourself for those that don't know you, and
Okay.
you know how crazy I am about, and a fan of you, my good friend. So by all
Well,
means,
we are a mutual admiration society, aren't we?
we indeed are.
Look,
Oh goodness,
and I think something just this got born out of the fact that we both think a lot and share a lot of our experiences. So, look, very simply, I mean, I've been in the area and field of learning and development and leadership for most of my career. And I've been a senior executive manager in a number of companies, both on the profit side as well as the not-for-profit. And I've also had my own business a couple times. So I will just tell you all, as I am extremely passionate about learning, especially how organizations operate, but because it translates to personal life as well, the boundaries, they don't exist. But that's one of the things we'll be getting into.
definitely. And one of the key things it would behoove me to emphasize. One of the key things that really I love about how you approach things is you pierce through, I'll say, facades very, very critically, and you're able to get to the source of and the root of a conversation or a topic pretty critically. And to me, that's always been something that's impressed me. So
Well,
I
thank you.
appreciate you.
I will just add that there are people who think that I'm a little too edgy, and that so sometimes it makes people comfortable, which I don't mean to. It's just I get into stuff. So, but
Yes.
and I love the way it's similar the way you have a way of reframing things. It's fascinating how you do that.
You're very kind, my friend. Very kind. I likewise have, of course, been a coach, consultant, and a practitioner, and focusing on transformation. And really, the key thing I hone in on is partnering with clients, right, to calibrate, as I like to say, around strategy, leadership, culture, execution, all those things. And at the end of the day, as I've always shared with you and shared with others, I'm interested in identity because I do think that's at the root cause of who we are personally, professionally. Human nature is always interesting, by all means,
Hmm.
reality, and then all those coming together for impact. So
There you go.
that's
Well
who I
said.
am.
Well said. Very well said. I like
Thank you
that.
so much.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. So what do you think the first area that the article gets into is, home, the crux of it, home and work, and the context collapse and the blurred boundaries there.
Yeah, yeah, it does. There's even before you get into that one section about that, there is a whole context for just setting it up about the call for why there's a change
Yep.
and the need for that. Um, I found that very compelling, and I find this whole area very fascinating. I was just talking with a colleague, somebody at a corporation, and she's got a young family and a husband. And I asked her the question. I said, so what do you see as the biggest challenge for people dealing with this whole environment with the uncertainty and everything going on? And she paused and she said, I think it's for those that have kids and have two at home, the
Hmm.
complexity of multiple roles and responsibilities.
Yep.
And she wasn't speaking for everybody, but she said that's something that she's found through in her conversations in her company and for herself a big challenge. So in there, that what that really talks about is it really does introduce the idea that there is something called blurred, and maybe we should
Yeah.
frame that a little bit, Si. So maybe when we talk about blurred boundaries between home and work, just maybe it'd be good to say what stands out about that, and once you kick that one,
Definitely.
yeah,
Definitely.
that'd be helpful for everybody.
Definitely. In terms of, and you said one of the key phrases in the article, as it mentions, is the need to measurably transform ourselves as leaders, and for any leader. And given that context, when we think about the home, the workplace, essentially we had multiple identities or different aspects that would manifest in those contexts.
That's right.
But now here I am. You're looking at a blank wall behind me. I'm looking at a bookshelf. So the boundaries between home and work are now blurred, exactly to your point.
That's
What
right.
I'm going to dive in a little bit more deeply. Just keep going, and please interrupt me if that's all right. Does that sound
Yeah,
good? Or?
yeah. So I do, and I just wanted to, when I think about the blurred, it's the fact that it's not just that we're physically there. It's just that, for example, how many times do you see people where their child comes into the room,
Yeah,
or they've got to get up and go because they've got to take care of something, or they're dealing with isolation. So there's a lot of ramifications for what that means to be physically in the place. And what we used to have is compartmentalized, and it isn't as easily to do. We have to do that in our relationships, and it's much more difficult. So please dive in.
And to that point, and this is one of the key things that grabs me, is there's no longer a separation. I have to now deal with Whit as a whole human being. The wholeness now confronts me directly.
Yeah.
And especially for I'll say, if leaders thought leading was difficult, and I'm not talking about titles and roles, leading in person, just think about now you've got to deal with the whole person, not only a segment of the person, respectfully, in a virtual environment like this.
That's a really good point. I was just thinking before our call about that, and I was thinking about imagining visually that when an executive or manager is looking on the screen at somebody across there, it's like looking at a glass.
Yeah.
And the question is, how full is that glass of who the person really is?
Yeah.
How much are they distracted? Where is their attention? What conversations have they been in? And all they have is a screen there, and they're going to make a lot of assumptions, and so easily dive in. But if the person's only got a quarter of themselves because of something's going on, you don't know about it, you're going to leave them in the dust.
Exactly. So one of the key things that grabs me around the home work divide with is really leadership is an experience. And if leaders now really, before, hey, I'm leading, etc. No, you are truly manifesting an experience now. How you express yourself, how others will experience you, how you experience them. So foundationally, if you're not aware of how people experience you, now it's that much more challenging. And how do you cultivate that wholeness in order to be successful?
But what's distinctive about that for you when you think about it's an experience? Because there are lots of roles that they're all experiences. But what's distinctive about leadership for you?
So leadership. So as an experience, I look at it as a journey now that you have to manifest with people on a moment by moment basis. And those moments are the interactions that we have. And I'll get very, very specific in this way, Whit. When you experience me on an individual level, your experience is how you feel, how I make you feel, what you're thinking at a point in time, and then what you do with it, what actions you take. That's your individual experience. I have my own individual experience. Our journey together, how you lead, how I lead, now is going to unfold in the context of getting work done, but also blending home and work. If I add one other thing, and this goes to a lot of respectfully topics that we've explored collectively, then our conversations, our relationships, our behaviors is that collective experience that we have that blends our individual experience. So
that's great. I love it. And I also think about how you take what you just said, all those different dimensions, and what the experiences of people of somebody who is in a role called a manager role because there's a formal title, or perhaps it's a kind of what I'd say work or initiative that you created. It has its own distinctiveness versus somebody who may be on the team who may not have the same kind of areas of responsibility.
Very well said.
Does that work? I mean, does that match your?
Yeah. Most definitely, and especially now, and as I've said to clients and working with them, and the way that we've leveraged some of these things. If you think about your experience with people in the office, what it was, now you've got to bring it into the virtual realm.
That's right.
And when the crisis hit here, if you will, and a very specific story, when the crisis hit, I had one client that said, okay, well, what do we do? And the immediate word that came to mind is, well, how do I connect with my people, ensure their safety, right? Connect with them. I said, well, when we think about connection, what does that mean to you? So number one, you have to reimagine what is leadership in this context and what is connection manifesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I used a very, very familiar phrase. I think this will ring a bell with. I said to him, I said, look, we've all seen perhaps the plaque, my house is clean enough to be healthy, but messy enough to be happy. A very, very long time. I said, that's the experience that actually builds connectedness.
Yeah. Because why? How so?
Basically, if we become very, I'll say, what's the word I'm looking for now? An operating room is very, I'm thinking of not antiseptic. There's another word that's escaping me now. Sterile. If an experience becomes very sterile, then it becomes lifeless.
Yeah, because it loses all the richness.
Exactly. So I said, and if I use that phraseology of, our house is clean enough to be healthy, but messy enough to be happy. What I said is, now, how do you now begin to cultivate and again, reimagine your experience with your people in such a way that you have the formality that's necessary to get business done, but that you have the informality to be human with them. So how do you reach out to people through tools like Slack or text them or whatever mechanism you can signal each other? And bring that in. How do you now, when I'm working with someone, if you will, or if you're facilitating a room with, how is it that you're interacting with them in a linear process, perhaps, but also interacting with them in a nonlinear way, perhaps detecting signals. And as you detect those signals, then asking questions and interweaving the nonlinearity with the linearity. How much do we depend on making the implicit and the explicit blend now? I can be explicit. Hey, we're going to do activity X, but wait a minute. Implicitly now, am I picking up on, you're nodding, telling me that you hear me, or you're not nodding and just kind of staring at me,
Right.
channeling out.
Yeah. So you just put out an awful lot. I mean, you said a lot of things, and I want to pick up on one area, which is when you just talk about the house being ready. What came to mind was I was thinking about cheapers. That really applies to as a manager or an executive. That applies to me.
Yeah.
It applies to where I am. It applies to my team. It applies to my group. It applies to the business. So you could say, how clean and organized are they all? And are they in part of what the work is? The second thing that comes to mind is that a lot of what is called for and what you saw in the article about what leaders need to be today, it's not new, but it becomes unavoidable today.
Yeah.
And what I'm talking about is, how do you look at and say, are you willing to look at those things that you put up, but you just laid out?
Yeah.
Does a manager say, I just do that, versus just say, I'm just going to try to find some way to go and get things done, get my team working, make sure they got plans, they got goals, they got all of that stuff. But at the same time, you do have to ask, who are these people? And do you care about that?
Yeah.
And if you don't care about it, should you care about it? And if you don't, how are you going to get there? So I think what you're laying out is an awful lot, but it's got to be in the context. I have to keep saying, are you ready as an executive to want to do that? Does that come naturally to you? Are you already doing it? Or is this something you really need to cultivate so that your house gets a little bit messy, but clean enough that you're smiling?
Yes. And if
the other people are smiling too. Excuse me.
Most definitely, exactly. And quite honestly, I think you pointed out something very crucial, because I go back, if it's been challenging to be leaders historically, now it's that much more challenging, because now we've got to blend all these things. And the takeaway or the insight that I continue to experience and help others recognize and appreciate is, don't over-engineer. Keep the organic, the aliveness, blend it with the engineered world, if you will, but don't over-engineer thinking that we're going to make everybody happy, healthy, together, connected by over-engineering. And a very sort of explicit example of it is, people I've had clients say, well, we're going to introduce first 5 minutes of every meeting where we're just going to ask how people are doing, checking in basically. Okay, you've taken something that is informal, checking in on a human level, formalized it as part of a meeting now, And people now feel like I got to show up to a meeting with Whit and I got to tell them how I feel. Well, I'm not comfortable doing that. That's over engineering. Just keep it organic and then find ways to interweave the organicness.
Well, I'm going to offer just an contrasting thing, which is that because there hasn't been the in-person as much, although we need to talk a little bit about how people are starting to go back to work. So there's a hybrid context too that is evolving, and that presents very different challenges. But I also think that when people are looking at how they go about coming across and are they really reaching out, sometimes those things of saying, let's do a check-in in the beginning would be fine because they had all the other informal times to connect.
Yes.
What I've been saying to, and I was just talking with a client, a very senior person, we were talking about, I said, how are your people doing with the COVID? And he said, well, actually, I'm not so sure. I said, you need to check in with them and then ask them what they need in order for them to be performing really, really well. To me, that says, and there are some examples of it, I think some of the people seeing this may know that, there are forums where you, instead of doing work, you just get together virtually and it's totally organic.
Yes.
So there's somehow you've got to have the organic there, but at the same time, there is some values of building some rituals on some things, but without getting rigid or, as you would say, sterile.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, and it is exactly as you're saying, it's the but not blending them so that you dilute them, if you will. And that's the key thing is leverage both, but not introduce the informality into the formality thinking it's going to do the trick. You have to keep it informal, but at the same time, relate the two.
Yeah. So, Sai, this brings up something about why we're even here. And the thing that we're calling this is called inventing the leadership for the future. And the reason you and I did it, and I'm going to confirm this with you, is that there is so much out there about to-dos, checklists, are you doing this, all the requirements of leadership.
Yeah.
And what you and I have been echoing for the last many, many months talking is there is nothing new. Don't pretend it. And if you try to a lot of people try to package old stuff into a new spin, there's value in that. Our hope was that through this dialogue that people would figure out that we have all the knowledge. The question is, what do you want to create for yourself? In the role as a leader or as a manager, what is that about? And hopefully, in this dialogue with together that we're doing this, we might stimulate some ideas. You might oppose us. You might agree with us. You might get sparked with some other idea. We're going fantastic. That's what we'd like to see happen. Does that? I think this was a perfect.
Completely on target. Yeah, and I'll add on to that very specifically is when one decides to go on a journey of learning and exploring, like you're saying, be prepared to do the hard work because it's not easy work.
And that's where I say it is hard work. And for me, it's like, I got to find partners. We used to say when I was at one of the big companies, you say for leaders that really grow, they need to find a partner when they get challenged and the work is really hard because you need someone to sit there who believes more in yourself sometimes and makes you grow. This is also true for very senior people. It gets very lonely there.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Whit. Please go on.
No, you're good.
I was actually saying I've been doing too much of the talking, my good friend. How about you? What other thoughts kind of come to your mind and what have you as you looked at the
the only other thing that I just wanted to put out a couple things that I've become pretty conscious of, thank you, is one is that I think you need to look at the kind of work we're doing when we work virtually with people. And when the things get blurred between the home and the work, what that says to me is I really have to know what people are ready to do. So, for example, I think of 3 levels. One level is what I call transactional. It's when you do planning, you do organizing, you're working with people and you get stuff done. And then the other level is what I call what is learning. It could be educational. You look at podcasts, people inform you. And then there's the third level, which I call deep learning, where there has to be a shift in relationships. It is difficult to do those. If I notice that, and I have a couple clients where there are some issues of trust or alignment in the team, and it's not the other 2 levels. We have to have some conversations where trust and rapport can be built up and there can be some agreements so they can start to move forward.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important part, especially as these boundaries get blurred between there, that we need to find some way of saying, what kind of work is I'm doing with these people? What do we need? What does that person need? And also, what do I need? I need to take care of myself as well. So I just wanted to put that out there, that it's an interesting question to say there are different kinds of work and figure out what that might be.
Yeah. And I think it's a powerful point that what you're calling out, because context is that much more crucial relative to the type of work than ever,
Amen.
quite honestly.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And I believe that we're so much governed, the horizon is determined by the context.
Yeah.
Partly, not entirely, but
yeah.
to a large extent, it really is. The only other thing I just wanted to add about the home versus the not, as we move into the hybrid environments, I've run into teams and I've heard stories about people who've had teams where 4 or 5 people were sitting in a room and the others remote.
Yeah.
I had where we were launching a whole new product into a whole new area, and there was problems with the launch, and they wanted to do a debrief and let's get some lessons from it. And there was it's really hard. And the reason, this is one of the lessons that I got from this, which was, and a professor told me this. He said, when you're virtually, you can absorb and assimilate half as much as you could when you were in person. The other way of saying that, you can cover half as much material in the time. An example of this that came out really vividly was one team was a hybrid team.
Mm-hmm.
There were 5 people in the room and the others were remote, and they were going through a conversation about making plans about what they were going to do. When they got to the end and they went through to explain where they were, every single person remote could not explain what was going on. The people in the room were totally clear. So something was missing.
Yeah.
So there was it was a clear, and they're all looking at each other and go, why don't they get this? And they were going, why are you guys so clear?
Yeah.
Like, I don't get it. So it just begs the question. We really need to know a lot more, and we have to be open. We're still learning.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, indeed. And to your point, Whit, the hybrid could actually be more challenging, precisely because you called it out, right?
I think it is.
Than either extreme. Yeah.
Yeah. Very different contexts that you're trying to work in, and there is something with the screen. I don't know whether some people say that, but I think what happens on the screen is different than what happens when you look at a piece of paper.
Yeah,
so.
Definitive. Well, I mean, I'll for myself, in working with groups and I miss the fidelity of the whole experience.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's like you can't sit there and watch a room and see how the team members are looking at each other and the way they're connecting verbally. We're all looking at the same spot when we're all remote.
Very well said. Very well said.
So what do you think are what's a takeaway for you, Sai, from all this, just at this point? Because I know we've been going for a few minutes and
definitely
not want to burn the airwaves too much, right?
Definitely, my friend. I think you said it perfectly, quite honestly. If anyone thinks they have a solution, I think we're still all exploring and learning.
Yeah.
So it isn't a prepackaged solution, but I think that has to be balanced with the whole idea that we already know a lot, if you will. Let's not repackage it as something new, but leverage our history.
Yep.
And be open to exploring as to what's going to work, and it'll be different for different contexts, different people, different groups, etc.
Yeah, that's great. I agree. I think that's right. And so I think the other one is just keep the questions open.
Yeah.
So the open questions, don't close too quickly, and I'd say stay open with them. And I think answers sometimes will emerge when they're ready to. And I don't mean to be corny or flaky when I say that, but it's really true.
We got to be aware and watch out as they emerge. Exactly to your point, Whit. Yeah, completely.
Yep.
Completely. Anything else, my good friend, before we sign off for this session?
Yeah, the last thing I'm going to say is people at home all have different profiles. You have people who are single, people who are paired up, and all kinds of permutations. When you're working with a team, it really begs the question, like, where are they, what do they need, and how are they doing? And blending them together, because you got to work together as a team, it's an interesting challenge. So I put that out only as something to consider. How are we taking into consideration those factors? Beautifully said. So, yeah. Beautifully said. And it really does start with exactly respecting each other and to be able to build that foundation. Excellent. Yep. Well said. Thank you. Anything else, my good friend? Nope. Anything else for you? I am good. I'm good. Okay. Beautiful. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us. And we'll look forward to our next conversation all around. Good night, everybody. Thank you. Oh, maybe it's a good day.
There, there you go.